My straightforward request was promptly denied. I screamed, "If it's the storage shed," I declared inwardly. "Don't make a fool of me. Our house is fairly spacious, and if the rooms were tidied up, there would be no problem having my father live with us. Truly, my husband holds feelings for me and my family that are less than that of a pet. Well then, I will sincerely clean up the storage shed and renovate it. Even the storage shed can be used just like a regular room if it's clean. There's meaning in living with my father now," I resolved. But Aaron was resistant. "There's no way I'm doing such a thing. Why do I have to renovate for your father?" I recalled the major renovation we did to ensure my mother-in-law, who visits sometimes, would not have trouble staying over. We even installed a bathroom and toilet like a hotel. I won't rely on such a demon-like man anymore, I decided. I'm Vivian Westhill, 52 years old. I help with the company my husband runs. My son Matthew has left home, and it's just the two of us living together. My mother-in-law sometimes comes over, but since her house is nearby, she doesn't live with us. How I met my husband goes back almost 30 years. I hate to say it myself, but I was famous for being good-looking in my hometown. My mother passed away in a traffic accident when I was in middle school, and I was living helping each other out with my father. Although I was invited out by many men, they were nothing but a hindrance to me. I had a dream of becoming an accountant and was working hard towards that. Despite this, I did have a boyfriend of the same age, and we would secretly call each other and go out to eat after part-time. Though I was popular, I had no intention of dating anyone else and never did. The only people I could let my guard down with were him and my father. He alone appreciated not my appearance, but my seriousness and true strength, among other aspects of my personality and way of thinking. I think we would have become a couple even if I wasn't the same in appearance. That was the kind of relationship we had. However, one day, everything changed when I returned home. An unfamiliar family of 3 was in my house. Seeing me, my father made a troubled face. I must have been more surprised. A known family introduced themselves like, "We are the West Hills." Hearing the name West Hill made it click. A famous, rich family in town. I wondered why they were in my house. "Welcome home, Vivian. Mr. West Hill here wants to take you as his wife." I was so shocked that everything went white before my eyes. A wife. Marriage. What are you talking about? I had never seen these 3 before. Everyone knows they hold significant influence in town as a wealthy family, yet the talk of me becoming a bride was unbelievable. "Nice to meet you, Vivian. Our Aaron has fallen for you at first sight. He insists on having you as his wife." My would-be father-in-law began speaking. Though it felt unreal being talked about like that, they didn't disappear, no matter how many times I blinked. Even being told such a thing, I've never met him before, so why do I have to marry your son? "Well, you see, your father owes a large amount of debt. We thought maybe we could help you out." Looking at my father and me alternately with a look of disdain, this was the first I'd heard of my father's debt. "Well, take your time and talk it over with your father. We'll come back in a week to hear your answer." Could our fate be decided in just a week? It didn't seem real. I thought things like this only happened in dramas, and I couldn't believe it was happening to me. Stunned, I watched as the 3 of them left after bowing their heads. "Dad, what's this about a debt? What's your relation with those people?" My father turned to me with a pale face, drained of all blood. "Vivian, I'm sorry. It's true. I was lonely and started drinking and gambling. Before I knew it, the money was gone, and I began borrowing to cover it. Everything I heard since coming home was beyond my capacity to accept." "Debt? Why didn't you tell me? I understand you were lonely after Mom suddenly passed away, but having a debt." I couldn't think calmly. Naturally, I couldn't even talk about it calmly. This was indeed out of the blue. As far as I could remember, my father never got drunk or angry from losing at gambling. I didn't even know Mr. West W. Hill invited me and introduced me to a place with Mr. West Hill's face. We could drink on a tab, and I didn't even know how much the bill was accumulating. The same thing with gambling. He let me buy lottery tickets together, and it just piled up. My father is truly a good person, not knowing how to doubt people. It must have been easy for someone like a scam artist. They must have been scheming from the start to trap my father and have their way with me. Hold on a second. What happens to you if I don't marry their son? I asked in desperation, wondering if there was any other way. I will probably be chased by debt collectors. I might even be sent to a work camp. I couldn't stop trembling at those words. There's no such thing as work camps these days. Can't you just keep working hard to pay it off? I asked, clinging to a shred of hope. Sorry, Vivian, that's impossible. The debt collectors might start contacting my workplace. I might not be able to work anymore. I was completely cornered. It was enough. There was nothing more to talk about. I wanted to vent all these feelings of frustration, humiliation, and anger. But I couldn't do that to my father, who has always taken care of me. I packed my bags and decided to go to the West Hill family right away. There was no use worrying about it. It wasn't easy to make this decision. But considering the increasing interest on the debt, I couldn't cling to my home anymore. There was no other way to resolve this but to marry Aaron. Before I changed my mind, I quietly left the house. I arrived at the West Hills home late that night. I thought it might be imprudent, but I boldly knocked at the front door. You're early. Seems like you're blinded by money. You're just like everyone else. I wanted to scream in frustration. I didn't want any money. And I didn't think I was unhappy because I was poor. Well, whatever, you're mine now. Seeing you with that pathetic boyfriend, I thought I'd make you mine. His words treated me like a doll. I felt utterly objectified and disgusted. I've left everything in the past. I look forward to being with you from now on. With a forced greeting, I entered the West Hill household. After that, everything progressed in a whirlwind. I don't remember much because I felt as though all my emotions had disappeared. After being betrayed by my trusted father and breaking up with my beloved boyfriend, it seemed like a grand wedding with a local famous person. Many people came to celebrate. All I remember from the wedding is the haggard look of my father, who had not been gone for very long since I left home. Seeing that made all my resentment towards my father vanish. So, accepting this as my fate, I decided to change my outlook and enjoy my married life. But that was the beginning of hell. Of course, I had to do all the housework and was made to help with the family business. I worked from morning till night. Add to that the pressure of having children, and my mental state was taking a toll. My mother-in-law constantly nagged and was like, "Haven't done the big cleaning yet." Not just unable to have kids, but this too. My husband, who was kind at first, now didn't care, showing an indifferent attitude. It certainly was not the sweet married life I had imagined. You're completely useless. A woman from the club would be better. Just quietly do your job and chores. I was treated like a housemaid. Soon I was pregnant, but even with severe morning sickness, they were not sympathetic. You're getting fat. Just do your chores and work properly. I don't know why I married you. I had given up on being acknowledged in this home. No matter what I did, a wife from a poor family would never be seen as more than a servant. It was frustrating, but for the sake of my unborn child, I had to endure. Then I gave birth. With the birth of a boy, my husband, who now had an heir, hardly ever came home. When he did return, he reeked of strong perfume and alcohol. He must have been at clubs. However, I was mostly occupied with raising my child, so his absence was rather a relief. My son Matthew grew up healthily and was easy to raise. My mother-in-law continued to annoy, saying Aaron would have done better. But I preferred Matthew not turning into such a worthless man, and my kind-hearted Matthew wanted to become a doctor. When he left for university, I felt a void in my heart. To fill that void, I decided to dedicate myself more to my work. Around that time, my father-in-law, who had treated me as a human being, passed away. My mother-in-law moved to a condo near the downtown area that my father-in-law owned. She came into my father-in-law's inheritance and is likely going to enjoy her time with friends. On the other hand, with the loss of my father-in-law, who always supported me and cared for me like my own father, I began to miss my father and started contacting him. Taking advantage of my husband's indifference, I started to talk to my father just like old times. Though it was difficult to speak without making my father feel guilty, one day he looked serious. When I asked what was wrong, he said, in a resigned tone, as if nothing could be done, that he was diagnosed with malignant lymphoma and was given 6 months to live. I was utterly shocked. No way, Dad, that can't be. You're so lively. It's impossible that you only have half a year left, just when we could finally be like a father and daughter again. I can't bear the thought of never seeing you again. But my father just smiled kindly and nodded. I don't want to leave my father alone. I will ask my husband to let him live with us in our spacious home. I'm not ready to give up, but at least I don't want him to be alone. My father said he was happy just hearing those words and left with a gentle smile. For the first time since getting married, I decided to confront my husband that night. As usual, he came home drunk with the smell of perfume. Seeing me awake and waiting for him, he looked startled. What's the matter? Don't tell me you want some affection. It seemed he hadn't changed his view on women being objects. I looked straight at my husband and said, Aaron, I have something important to talk about. My father has been diagnosed with terminal cancer and has only 6 months to live. I want him to live with us in this house. Of course, I won't let it be a bother to you. We can just use one of the vacant rooms in the house. That's okay, right? You will listen to such a request, won't you? Since my husband was hardly at home, there should have been no reason to object. I took it for granted that he would agree. But an unexpected reply came back from my husband. Just leave that half-dead old man alone. I'm not going to let someone like that into the house. It'll ruin the house's atmosphere. Absolutely not. If you want to do that, you can leave. I have no intention of living with a sick person. My request was flatly denied, and I felt like I had fallen into a gaping hole in the ground. If you want, the shed is fine, I screamed inside my heart. Don't mock me. Our house is quite large, and there is no problem if my father moves in. After cleaning up a room, we can live without facing each other. My husband really holds feelings for me and my family that are less than that for a pet. Well then, I will seriously clean and renovate the storage shed. If the storage shed is cleaned, it can be used just like a normal room. There is meaning in living with my father now. There's no way I'm doing such a thing. Why do I have to renovate for your father? From now on, accompany me and take proper care of me, recalling the major renovation I did for my mother-in-law, who visits sometimes to make a bathroom, toilet, and washroom just like a hotel. I decided not to rely on such a demon-like man anymore. Since then, I have worked more than ever and went to see my father when I had the time. There were days when he seemed to be doing well and days when he seemed to be doing badly. I couldn't feel alive every day unless I saw my father's face. I was only praying for my father's illness to be cured. Then maybe my prayers were heard, as my father was still alive after 6 months. And miracle might be happening. I felt like a bright light was shining in. I started to live positively little by little. About half a year after my father's confession, my husband came back with a pale face. I sensed that something serious had happened because my husband had never come back early since we got married. Hey, sit down. I have important news. I was told that I have cancer and my life expectancy is short. Come to think of it, my husband had been looking pale lately. I thought it was due to drinking too much alcohol or lack of sleep. Strangely, I was not shocked. It was completely someone else's problem. Besides, everyone should take care of themselves. Oh, you were like, leave that half-dead man alone. Right, I'll do just as you said. If you say so, then leave as you said. I'm leaving. Oh yes, I found a lawyer for our divorce matters. I left the room without looking back. I decided to leave suddenly, but I did not regret it at all. You don't have a penny, do you? Where do you think you're going, leaving this house? You won't be able to live a luxurious life like you have been. You have been living on everything I have worked hard for, inhuman. My husband continued to shout something in the background, but it had nothing to do with me. I never wanted a wealthy life. Being able to eat 3 meals a day and having a place to sleep was all I needed. I returned to my room, packed only the essentials into my suitcase, and left the house. Whether my husband was in trouble or not, it didn't matter to me. I sent the email I had drafted, noticing my resignation to the president straight away. I wanted to settle everything regarding my husband and the West Hill family. I had been supporting him since he barely worked, but this was the end. In fact, since discussing my father's situation half a year ago, I had been in contact with a divorce specialist lawyer introduced by the company's advisory lawyer. I talked about everything regarding our nearly 30-year marriage, starting from events before our marriage. The lawyer just nodded quietly, listening to my story. However, when I mentioned that I had been working for the family business without pay, he was genuinely surprised. It would amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars in salary. After finishing my story, he was immediately like, "The divorce should be easy." I had also taken photos of emails from women and had noted down serious moral harassment, providing plenty of evidence of my husband's fault. Since I got a smartphone, I had also recorded his verbally abusive remarks. That was enough, but the lawyer also brought me photos of my husband's infidelity for free. He promised that everything would go well even if I didn't do anything, telling me to feel like I was on a big ship. So I didn't need to answer the angry calls from my husband, and the lawyer would solve everything just by me throwing it all onto him. I was naturally walking with a smile among the angry calls from my husband. There were, of course, calls from my mother-in-law. She was probably like, "Are you planning to abandon everything and leave when my adorable son is in trouble? If her son is so adorable, she should take care of him herself. It would be fine for her to return to that house whenever, as a luxurious room looking like a show home is prepared for her." But it seems one reason she is panicking is that the company started by my father-in-law is falling apart without me, who had been supporting them, and the nearly decorative president who can't steer the company due to ESS. Things are not going well. My mother-in-law, who has only helped in the initial stages, is useless in the company, unable to even make copies. Even if she shouts and yells, she can't unify the employees and make them look in the same direction. Some colleagues have contacted me, asking me to come back, but I had no intention of devoting myself to the company anymore. Given that, although the company had been cherished as a local one, the number of clients will steadily decrease. I loved my father-in-law, and I felt sorry for letting the company he worked hard to grow decline, as if I were the main culprit. That being said, I think if my husband and mother-in-law had worked as hard as my father-in-law, this wouldn't have happened. I probably wouldn't have quit, and Matthew would have likely considered taking over the family business. On top of that, my husband not only did hardly any work at the company, but also seemed to be constantly hitting on female employees and inviting them for affairs. It was suspicious when many female employees resigned. It seems that the women who had unpleasant experiences are planning to sue the company for sexual harassment. Now my husband has to settle all the mess he made in his life. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy. God is watching you get punished for doing bad things. I want my husband and mother-in-law to be properly punished so that those who have worked honestly do not look foolish. As if that wasn't enough, the company was accused of tax evasion by the IRS, totally by accident. While my lawyer was investigating, several questionable points were found in the accounts. Upon further investigation, suspicions arose that my husband had been embezzling money. Looking back, it was strange that he had so much money to play around with. There wasn't such a high salary for him. When I was helping with the accounting, I was too indifferent about my husband. I didn't notice the discrepancy between his income and expenditure. If I had thought about where all the play money was coming from, I would have understood. I vaguely felt that because he was so rich, it was fine to spend as much money as he wanted. In reality, he had been squandering the company's money and even my salary, which he had transferred to his own account, seems to have been used up by him. Kickbacks for orders, bribery to companies making decisions for his own benefit rather than for the company. He had dipped his hands in all kinds of evil deeds, taking advantage of the lack of supervision. Tax evasion and special embezzlement. My husband's crimes are not just one. I don't know whether the court's judgment will come out first, or if my husband will run out of life first. But I want him to atone for as much as possible. I also started looking at the books half a year ago and copied them to ensure that evidence is not erased, and submitted them to the IRS. The fact that I have been studying to become an accountant came in handy here to fill the payment gap even a little. My husband sold a company to a major corporation and also sold the large mansion. Because of the rush to sell, it was bought for a song. My mother-in-law is also selling her condo to pay me and the IRS, and they are living in a small apartment complex together. Rumors have it that he has several children from affairs, and payments for child support to the affair partners are also in arrears. He should at least have used contraception properly, but he probably assumed that affairs and illegitimate children were a man's privilege. He might have life insurance, but will that be enough? Even though my mother-in-law is elderly, she seems to have started working because she has to earn money for her son's medical and living expenses. Having looked down on others until now, it's probably quite hard to be seen with sympathy by those around now. The parent and child should reflect on their actions until the end. I received a substantial amount and bought a condo in a convenient and nice location. There, I reunited with my father and started living together. Thanks to Matthew's introduction to a renowned doctor, my father is now recovering, surprising even the doctors. Actually, my father had been living with Matthew until now. I convinced my father, who was thinking of entering a hospice or living alone, to live together at Matthew's place. After I left the house, my father had saved quite a bit of money for me. He was thinking of freeing me once the amount borrowed was saved up. Hearing this, Matthew thought of my father as a more respectable person than his own father and kindly agreed to my unreasonable request. Both Matthew and my father had long hoped that I would divorce my husband, and they were overjoyed when I left the house. I never thought that not divorcing would worry the two of them. Until the condo was decided, I lived together with them and chose a place close to Matthew's place, so even when I started working, he could check on my father when he had time. My father is also trying to bridge the gap with his grandchild, talking about when I was small and about my mother. Matthew seems to be talking about his background a lot. I hope to build a good relationship like this. I started working at the law firm that helped me. I'm not an accountant, but having some experience is a strength, and I'm helping with corporate cases with advice from other lawyers. I'm studying to get a tax accountant qualification. Age doesn't matter, and my husband was sentenced to actual imprisonment. Now he's behind bars. There's no worried about not having money or food, so perhaps it's ironically a good thing. My mother-in-law forcibly moved into a relative's house. Having acted superior until now, she must be getting a taste of her own medicine. I was around town for getting back at my mother-in-law, husband, and their company. I'm newly astonished at the number of people harassed with power and sexual harassment transactions. I was worried that some people might have lost their jobs due to the company being acquired, but it seems to have worked out somehow. I feel everything is moving in a good direction, and I'm savoring the happiness, thinking that alone was enough. I returned from work to find my father and a man at home. Welcome back, Vivian. I brought someone who wants to meet you today. Do you remember? It was my ex-boyfriend, the only person I truly loved. I recognized him at first glance, even after nearly 30 years. My father was like, "As soon as you went to that house, I went to apologize to him." He understood and had decided that if I escaped from that house, he would accept me immediately. My ex-boyfriend, smiling warmly, was like, "Vivian is a hard worker," so I waited for a long time. Matthew also knew about my ex-boyfriend, and it seems that 3 men were watching over me. I'm planning to live with these 3 men I truly love.